Welcome to the KimAppa podcast. Robbie over there, Jarrod over here. So the big news this week, Robbie, obviously, is what has happened with the UAE women in their T20 against Qatar. But we'll get to that.
Is it?
Yeah, but I thought before we won't start with that. I thought we would start with Virat Kohli. Here's my first one for you. I know I've heard you talk about him technically, and I've heard everything else. But I was more interested in, obviously he's now retired from Test cricket, but when was the first time you saw him, right? Like, what's your first memory of Virat Kohli, the player, the kid, the batter, whatever?
So first of all, I want to call out the elephant in the room. I don't see a helmet on, right? So I'm deeply disappointed.
I wonder if I could get my son's helmet on. No, it's probably too small.
Yeah, but now we gotta up the ante a little bit with this, guys. So helmets on for the next episode. We're not gonna take this lightly, okay? We're gonna not leave our viewers disappointed. All right. But coming back to your question, when did I first see Virat Kohli? I actually first met Virat actually at, we just won the World Cup in 2007 and they'd won the Under-19 World Cup as well. And we had a felicitation and actually met him during that felicitation, met him, Ishant Sharma, Jadeja, and the likes of the few, and the likes of them. For the first time. Then I knew Jadeja before that. We'd done a junior camp before at CCI in India, in Mumbai. So that was the first time I met him. But the first time I spoke to him, actually that's actually wrong. Actually, I actually played the game. We played a game, the Karnataka versus Delhi game. At Kotla. It was the game that unfortunately his father expired. So I actually was playing that game, and it was in 2006, end of 2006, end of 2006, and he'd we'd batted first, and we'd scored a big score, got 100 in that game, and then we heard about Virat, we heard about this young kid's father's demise, and we were like, okay, I think there was some accommodation that we needed to do as far as extra fielder and all that's concerned, and all that was sorted, and then he came on a bat the following day, which was pretty incredible. I remember just kind of speaking to him for about 30 seconds or so, just offering my condolences, but it was very, very sweet about it. But batted like that day, there was something about his eyes and the way he batted, and just the way he there was very resolute when he batted, very few emotions, very resolute. Not like the burning fire we see Virat batting with. It was more like an ember. You know what I mean? It was just like steady and controlled and keeping everything in check. Something very beautiful. I felt, I sensed that time about a youngster dealing with the demise of his father, and still turning up to play for his state. Something very beautiful about it. Yet, just the way he went about his innings was phenomenal. And I more than the cricket, what I remembered was the way he held himself. So for me, that was the first time I kind of thrist with perhaps the greatness of Virat Kohli and just Virat as a player. But after that, we became fast friends in RCB, and then we spent a lot of time together. And but yeah, as in he's grown by leaps and bounds. So I've seen him when he was really young. When we both were really young.
So I remember hearing this story from players who saw AB de Villiers and Virat Kohli in the nets, who said that when you watch them both in the nets, I can't remember, were you there when AB was there as well? I think you, or you must have been.
No.
You missed it.
I finished at RCB in 2010, and then 2011 went to Sahara Pune Warriors, and that's when I think AB was bought into
like for
RCB.
like AB de Villiers for Robin Uthappa.
No, definitely not like for like.
But I remember a lot of younger players being in the nets, being like, it's really clear how much more naturally talented and things come to AB de Villiers than they do to Virat Kohli. And Virat Kohli's talked about this before, right? He's talked about how AB de Villiers is almost perfect and can do anything, and you teach him a new thing and he learns it straight away and all this sort of stuff. So I think that's a really interesting one because we got to see them in such close proximity to each other for a long period of time, but they're two players from two different countries. But quite clearly, as great as AB de Villiers was, I think we all kind of felt like he left something on the table, right? Like as in overall in his career. Virat has basically stretched every last bit of talent out of himself, right? And so I wonder if there is something different about Virat as a professional compared to maybe someone else like AB de Villiers.
Virat was all emotions, right? He was all heart, right? I don't think he left anything out there on the field. He gave everything that he could possibly give mentally, emotionally, and then some. So I think that's what stands out about Virat. And often to the, it grated people, right? And when you played against him, it definitely grated you. As when I played against RCB, ever since I left RCB, it was always something that is like, okay, I understand intensity, but like this is a little over like that line of modicum of balanced intensity. He was just all there, right? But for him, that's how much it meant to him, right? He wanted to win every game, and you could see it in the guy when he played, right? And so you understood it as as a captain. When he was captain, you understood the intensity as well. But obviously, he was driven by excellence because he was able to find that within himself after a certain point. He was driven by excellence and combine that with the intention to, or with the desire to win every game. It's a dizzy combination, right? It can leave a lot of people around you, feel inadept in a sense, and inept to kind of match that level of energy, and that's what he brought to the team. And I think he played a big part in the transition of Indian cricket. Obviously India were looking for the next great thing that could come from Indian cricket after, say, an MS Dhoni in the form of a captain, because after Saurav Ganguly it was MS Dhoni, and then you wanted to have the next great in the form of a batter, because Sachin Paji was leaving, and then so it was right there for the taking, so to speak, right? So here comes in this guy, this young guy with that desire and the intensity to win every game, this pursuit of excellence to win every game. And just because of the energy he possessed and just because of the intensity he brought on, he was able to become not just a great batter, become the next big great batter from India, but also the next big great captain from India, right? And he was able to take on both, right? And for me, I think it's hard to do both, and I think there was competition there as well between Rohit and Virat, and today you listen to the fan clubs and you see the intensity also of that rivalry that is not perhaps between the players but between the fans individually of those players, right? But and I think his intensity and his energy brought about the covering of two aspects of that India really needed. A great captain to follow suit MS, and he was able to replicate that for the most part as far as Test cricket was concerned. I think there were a few limitations as white ball captain, because that pursuit of excellence, right, kind of I think overpowered in white ball cricket, and you have less time to correct mistakes there, right? But in Test cricket, you have 5 days where over that period which you can correct and amend the mistakes you make or the wrong calls that you take, and find results. And he was able to do that with a really strong bowling unit. And I truly believe you need a solid bowling unit to win Test matches, because you have to take 20 wickets over a three-day period when you're bowling, three-day period when you're bowling, right? And he was able to do that. Kudos to him. I thought he was a very good captain. But for me, there is a difference between captaincy and leadership, and I think just his pursuit of excellence as an athlete, as a cricketer, and that will to win every game, kind of what's the right word? I'm not getting the right word. For me, it's kind of set such a high bar and such a high standard for people to live up to that, and he had very little patience with guys getting to that level or not, right? For them, I think in his mind, as someone who pursued excellence, in his head the standard was, if you're playing international cricket, you just got to be here, you can't be here, right? So I think he had very little.
Yeah, I've written about this a little bit before, that he reminds me a lot of the two athletes he reminds me the most of are probably Ricky Ponting, right? And the other one is from outside cricket, is Michael Jordan. So he didn't didn't get to the levels of Michael Jordan. But you go back and you watch The Last Dance. Michael Jordan just didn't really understand why people couldn't do what he did, because in his mind he was willing himself to be able to do that. So why can't you will yourself to be able to do that? And so it's a really tough thing. And then I think there are a lot of players. I've never talked to a player who didn't play to win, right? Like, they all play to win, but there's a scale, right? Yeah. And I think there's a scale that for people like Ponting and Jordan and Virat actually tips over into, it's not actually about wanting to win anymore. It's about not wanting to lose, like that fierce desperation of like not wanting to be on the wrong side of this thing. And I think it's so interesting to me that Ponting and Kohli's careers are so similar when you look at Test cricket, right? They come in as the younger players. They're good, but they're not dominant. They don't, they don't completely dominate for a long time. And then their athleticism matches their brain for about 6 or 7 years. And they have a peak of like that, I mean, Ponting and Kohli have had two of the best Test peaks. Yeah. I mean, it's insane when you look at how great they were for that 6 or 7 year period. And then it's almost like that drains them. And once they become adults and they have other things to worry about in life, and it's not just about scoring that next run, and maybe their athleticism drops off a little bit as they get into their 30s, they both have big dips. The difference is that Ponting's dip comes in a period where everyone's averaging 45 at Test cricket. So his dip looks okay on paper, but if you were watching it live, it was quite clear that Ponting was finished. Whereas Kohli's comes when no one's making runs anywhere, right? So his dip looks even more dramatic. And I think we've done the analysis on this before. It's quite similar. But I think playing with that kind of intensity, I mean, Michael Jordan retired in the middle of his career, right? Like, there is an element of that. I think you can only push that intensity so far. Do you know what I mean? Like, it does drain you in a way that perhaps playing in a more even-keeled way of other great batters doesn't.
So there are a couple of points I want to make here. You said it absolutely right? When you said that when they are adult, as in, for me, how I perceive that is that, say for example, they experience things that they're deeply passionate about, like the sport that they're playing, and that means as much to them. Suddenly they operate in that space. For example, as far as Virat is concerned, his family, his marriage, his kids, and all of that. He worked from that same deeply passionate place for that. And so suddenly he had to split himself into two, and then the balance went off. And I don't know, in depth about Ponting, so I can't speak to that. But to this, as from an observational point of view, this is what I think could have happened, where he had to split himself up into two, draw energies there. And simultaneously, there was a lot of things happening within cricket as well, in the ecosystem of captaincy, change in power, shift in power. Captaincy, went past him and then went to Rohit. And so there was a power shift as well. So the dynamics of all that also changed. So a lot of things kind of happened simultaneously. And I think that kind of took a toll. And and then you could tell that he was soul searching for a year or so, right? And it wasn't cricket. I think it was things in the periphery of cricket, and perhaps priorities in life as far as family, marriage, and children are concerned. So all of those aspects, I think, perhaps kind of took precedence as well. And he was trying to split himself between the two. And I can empathize with that. I think it's quite hard to do, and it takes a while to find yourself. I think as men, when we are truly passionate about something, and then something else comes into our life where we're very self-aware as people, but when you have to make space for that, right, that sometimes eats into the space of your first passion. And then suddenly you're trying to find a way to balance it, right? And you go off balance, and then somehow you find a way to find that middle ground, right? And I think to his credit and to their credit, both Anushka and Virat tried their best to find a balance with it. And that's why I think they were so like stoically there for each other, and so ferociously defending each other and being there for each other, because they understood perhaps the intensity of who he was as an athlete, and the intensity he brought into who he was as a husband and father and a family man, and to kind of find that balance so that he could keep both going for as long as possible,
I think that the thing is, and it's really hard to have this conversation with him now, but I think the thing is that you need to understand that there's only one bucket that you're drawing from. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Once he got to the point where he was so involved with all these brands, right? Like he becomes the brand person. He's then so involved with RCB. I know he pushed back eventually against RCB, but he's not just an Indian batter. He's also the Indian captain. As you said, he's got the fatherhood. He starts to get into progressive causes and all these different things, right? The bucket doesn't get bigger because you start to look grander. And I think when he started to go through his dip the first time, I wrote an article where I basically said, I'm sure he's training just as hard as he used to, right? I'm sure he believes he's doing exactly what he did before, but there's no way that there can't be an overall drain on that. And a friend of his who'd worked with him quite a bit was just like, yeah, it's just too much. And he can't pull back because he has the same intensity for life that he once had for batting. And so the two are sort of coming together. The other thing is, to go back to the AB de Villiers point from before, and you could probably put this with Ricky Ponting as well. I think Kohli and Ponting were so good that they overcame technical deficiencies, right? Like, we know with Ponting, the way he would push at spinners was a big issue. The way that he would sort of thrust at the ball when it was wide of off stump because he couldn't just sit back and let it be bowled to him, right? And you look at Virat, and there were obviously issues within Virat's technical thing as well, where, again, trying to get on top of that ball outside the off stump. When the wobble ball came along, probably needed to come up with a new theory to be able to handle the wobble ball because it was a delivery he hadn't had. And we could go back to the whole Jimmy Anderson thing of Jimmy Anderson's probably the canary in the coal mine for Virat and his technique. And there were other issues with the way he played spin, which hadn't mattered as much when the wickets weren't ragging sideways, right? And so they were so good that they overcame that. And at a certain point, there are just little things. And maybe once you get over 30, your incredible physicality or your athleticism just changes a little bit. And there's a difference between the great technicians and maybe some of the great batters. And maybe that had caught up with him a little bit as well. And he didn't have the ability to follow that.
If I may speak to that, and physical abilities as well, right? I think he is easily the hardest working guy in the room. Often made us feel like, dude, how is he doing all of this?
Yeah.
And doesn't this take away from him instead of adding into him? In fact, he actually dealt with a lot of kind of stealth injuries where people really didn't know what was going on. People think he's extremely fit, but he actually worked so hard that he covered up any narrative that could have been set as far as injury was concerned. He had a bad back because of the kind of training he was doing, and it wasn't. But the way he worked in the gym, right, and the way he built, because you can't fix the spine, so to speak, with the amount of the kind of implications it has on you over a period of time. He must have been working on the supporting muscles that help the back, and we never really saw a narrative of an injury, so to speak, for an extended period of time with a Virat. So he made sure that his ethic was on point. I remember 2 years ago, whilst he was still speaking to me, we did an interview when I was working for Geostar. When I was working with Geostar, and I went and did something for RCB and Geostar, and we had a conversation, and I saw him in the gym. He worked out before the interview, and he went back and he did something immediately after. So like why? He was like, oh no, I just want to there's something I knew I'd committed my time for you, or committed my time for this stuff. So I finished this, and then there was something left for me to do. So that piece I wanted to make sure I finished it after, so that I've got that box checked in my day. That's the level of professionalism he kind of put out there on a day-to-day basis, and that's what brings greatness, right? So I think even as far as physicality is concerned, Jar, I think he's still pretty right up there. I think it's, if anything, I think the energy is a little sapped. The heart is a little sapped more than anything, and he probably felt that, I can't bring the amount of heart that I would like to bring to be able to play this best version of the game.
It's also, we're talking about the first generation of triple format players all the way through their career. And you know what it's like, to go through the grind. And there was a video this week. I don't know if you've seen him, but Fergus O'Neill, the Victorian fast bowler, he's been playing in county cricket. And he's only young, but he seems like a pretty smart guy. And he was just saying the problem with county cricket is it just doesn't stop, and you just get ground into the dust. And in county cricket, if you're a good player, you can go back a little. Joel Garner wasn't bowling at 88 miles an hour all the way through because he was 6'7" and no one could play him. So he would bowl some medium pace, and then someone would racially abuse him and he'd come back in off the long run and destroy people, right? At international level or IPL level, it's much harder to do that. You're closer to 100% every time that you're playing. And so we've got this whole generation of people, and especially the Indian ones, even separate to everything else, because they don't play as much overall T20 cricket. They don't hop around in the way that some of the other players do, but there's a lot more intensity in what they do. If your franchise loses, all right, like an RCB losing has become a part of his identity as much as anything else. It's really hard from a time management position. It's really hard for a rest and recuperation type thing when you always have another series coming up and you always have something else coming up. Whereas, you look at what Jimmy Anderson did. Like, Jimmy Anderson would still probably happily be playing because he wasn't playing all three formats. This is the first generation where we've made people be great in three different formats, and we're starting to see the effects of that on some of these players, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think people tend to understand the impact it has on you mentally, physically, emotionally, like even spiritually. Like you want to hold on to something to keep you afloat and help you navigate through the intensity. People often, because they're viewing this and people are seeing this as something that they're truly passionate about, and they're experiencing it, and they want to experience victories, right? And today the intensity from even the fans of cricket have gone through the roof, right? And so when the expectations are so high and you're so passionate about it, and today we have an avenue to even vent our frustrations directly to the player that wasn't available for the fans in the past, right? Before, if they had to do that, then they would have to go out to the streets and put in a lot of effort to rally a group of people together and burn effigies and put, slipper garlands on people and all of that, right? And that happened when big losses happened or things that really hurt the emotions of the people happened, right? But today you're able to do that online directly to the player, right? Just to manage those emotions itself are a task. It's not easy. Imagine like 100,000 people just loading your feed up with abuse, right? People think it's you never really know what it feels like until you actually experience it, right? And it's depressing, man. It's actually depressing. It actually can set you down a spiral that is very hard to climb back up out of, right? And you have to understand that emotionally and mentally, Virat and a lot of these players who the first generation, try format players in this era, you have actually kind of navigated through all of this at the same time, simultaneously. It's not happened one after the other. It's actually happened all simultaneously. The load that actually has that has on a human being is huge. And people don't tend to understand it. Like, I remember the first time I received hate was my last match for KKR. I didn't know how to deal with it. Like, I'd recovered and completely from clinical depression and being suicidal, and I stopped my medication in 2017, and then end of mid 2018 this happened, and I immediately I felt myself going down that spiral because the hate didn't stop. It didn't extend just to me. It went to my family. It went to my mom, my dad, my wife, my child. It went to them. It went to that level, and when it goes to that level, it's suddenly you start asking a lot of existential questions. Like, you ask, if like you question your self-worth as a person, and you're like, it's coming from all angles and there's no respite. right? And happen like 1 day is fine, 2 days is fine, 3 days, 5 days, a week is fine, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, 40 days, 50 days. And then you're like, what's going on? When is this going to end? Right? And then it's like, I had to switch off comments because I was like, I have to look after my mental health because I need to turn up for my family. I need to be there. I need to be a husband and a father here at home. Right? That's cricket, and that's outside. That's my passion, and that's what I live for outside, and that's what I do. But I need to be able to separate the two. And these guys have been through this whole thing from 2014, 15, 16, 17 onwards. Like they've gone through it, received hate, and we're all human. We all make mistakes, right? We're not perfect. Right? Like Virat's not perfect. MS Dhoni's not perfect. He's made his bunch of errors. Virat's made his bunch of errors. Rohit's made his bunch of errors. We're all humans. And especially in a position of power, we're all human at the end of the day. We're going to have biases. We're going to have, our own ways of running things. And you're going to receive a lot of love for it. You're going to receive a lot of hate for it. And when you're as big as Virat Kohli, who's got 270 million Instagram followers, like, social media, just on one platform, right? Then suddenly the love and hate comes in that big a volume, so to deal with that also takes away a lot from you.
And you think about him as a person, because he is an emotional person, right? So
he is, of course.
If and not everyone is, right? That there are other athletes who, they talk about this in the West Indies a lot, about how there are, sort of low players, medium players, and high players, and the high players that handle that have so many emotions struggle, because from game to game they go through this. He's that sort of person. It really matters to him, and he does this. And he's gone through a world that, as you said before, he replaced sort of a little bit of Sachin and a little bit of MS Dhoni in the same way, right?
Yeah.
But he also had
at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time. But he also, and that's hard enough anyway, right? But he has to deal with this new world, the triple format player, and on top of that, he has to deal with the social media and how it actually works. And no one has had to deal with what he's had to deal with. We talked about, a couple of weeks ago, about how the Olympics, probably a large part of the reason that the Olympics has cricket is because of the Virat effect, right? Like he might affect the future of cricket just by existing, even though he might not even end up playing in the Olympics in the end. The gravitational pull that he has, and the sort of, geopolitical importance that he has, and the brand awareness and all this sort of stuff, who does he turn to? Right? Like there isn't anyone. He can't talk to you about this sort of stuff, because you are a very famous cricketer who had to go through it once or twice. He has to go through it all the time. And I know this because
all the time.
I had a famous player come to me once and pay me to do some consultancy on social media. And he's like, this thing has happened. All these people are saying all this sort of stuff. And obviously I went through the tools that he could use and, talked about it, from an intellectual point of view and all that sort of stuff. And I said, but when it comes down to it, you're going to have to find your own way, because you're the person who is going through this, and no one else has gone through exactly what is happening to you at the moment, right? So you're going to have to work that. That was kind of his entire life. Like once he, as you say, once he sort of gets to that point where he takes over the sort of such an MS mantle, even Rohit Sharma doesn't have the same level of scrutiny that Virat Kohli does, right? Like it's just a different world. Throw in that famous actress wife as well. Like, do you know what I mean? He has to deal with that whole side of it. It's so hard.
And to build, to earn money for your family, you want to maximize it, because again, we have a smaller window than say for example corporates, right, or businesses or entrepreneurs, right? There's no time length to how long a business can last. Here, at best, you're doing 20 years. Virat's played from 2008 to 2024, and that's and he's one of the greatest players to have played the game. That's 16 years. So you got to also think about, he's dealing with all of this, right? Within the game, outside the game, all of this is brand new for him, right? Whilst trying to be a family man, whilst trying to make the most money that he can make, and he deserves to, because if he's all of that we love and that we love about him as a cricketer, then why shouldn't he maximize his potential as far as earning capacity is concerned? So he needs to focus on that, the brand that he is, and turn up as a family man, turn up as a husband, as a father, as a provider there, and work through all of this whole thing with that intensity that he goes through. Perhaps only his closest confidant being his partner, right? and he has to now and imagine the roles, the dual or the the triad of roles that each of them have to play with each other, because nobody else is experiencing what he's experiencing,
Yeah.
or to the depth at which he experiences. So it's not an easy gig. It's a tough gig, right? And he's done it really well, and for me, I remember speaking about him as a leader versus him as a captain. I've always and him as a batter. I think he's an incredible batter. I think he's an incredible captain. But for me, one of the places where I felt he fell short for me was as a leader, right? And I think as a group, he was able to inspire people in moments when he needed the intensity to be up. He spoke well, and so he was able to inspire people through conversations. But I think there was one part which I spoke to, which for me is, which I think happens, but for me, I think that was one thing I spoke to, which I think his fans felt very, very disappointed about. He himself perhaps felt very disappointed about. But for me, I think it's normal. I think we're all human. We're not infallible in that sense.
Yeah.
And there are areas in our life where, because we're going 100 miles an hour, 365 days a year, there's some part that discrepancy is going to show up in, right? And I think perhaps with him, it is perhaps leadership in that sense, to a certain degree.
I think that comes back to what we were talking about before of, why
there's only one bucket to draw from.
Yeah, but also there's a lot of great players don't become great coaches. And part of the reason is that they don't understand why you won't run up sand dunes at 4 a.m. for 7 hours, right? Yeah. And you're like, that won't make me a better athlete. This is what will make me a better athlete, right? Like, I need to go and work on this, or I need to do this. And they're like, no, if you worked as hard as me, you'd be the same as me. And so there's that whole thing of, we think about AB de Villiers, and I'll use him again just because for the Virat thing, I think it's perfect. We think about AB de Villiers as this incredible natural batter, right? Like, he has more time than Virat. He has more time than, almost anyone else of the modern era, right? Probably more time than Sachin or Lara or Smith as well. He has the ability where he's seeing the ball so much earlier than everyone else, right? And we see that as natural, right? Whereas we see intensity as something that you can get in, you can fire yourself up. We see patience as something that you can learn over time. But realistically, Alistair Cook was born patient, right? Like, that just came out in him in a way that, other cricketers are never going to have that level of patience. And so I think that in Virat's mind, the way that we talk about these things, he's like, wow, I made myself into this. So if you're a lesser player, you should be able to make yourself into this as well, without knowing that is part of, it's within him, right? Like that fire, that skill, that talent, whatever is within him. And there's a really interesting podcast where they talk about soft skills and hard skills when it comes to athleticism, right? And so jumping really high is obviously, that's the first thing we see in athleticism, right? But we forget that the guy who has the eye, who can see the angles before everyone else, that's actually a form of athleticism as well. And it's the same 100%. With batting. I don't think we think about all those sorts of little things. And so I can understand why at times Virat Kohli would be like, why don't you just give up sugar, right? And hit the treadmill for 7 hours a day, right? And the other guy's like, but I've got bad knees, and I really like sugar, and my wife doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many other reasons why all these sorts of things happen. I want to talk about him as a batter just very briefly. I know we talked about him as a leader, we talked about him as a human, but just as a batter, his ability against top end pace is what I think he should be remembered about when we're talking about great players. We looked this up. I think Varun's on actually Varun's probably, oh no, he's still there, I think. I don't know if Varun has any stats to back this up, but we looked up, the best players in the world against top end pace. And Virat is always at the top of that mark, Robbie, right? Yeah. But he's also at the top of that mark when he starts to have his form dip, right? So you would expect that if the form dip's going to affect anything, it should be against 140 kilometers an hour and faster, right? And yet it hasn't. And I think that he's not going to go down at probably the Viv Richards or maybe Sachin Tendulkar and Ricky Ponting levels. But he's like in that, for me, he's in that conversation, and with his friend AB as well, he's in that conversation of when the ball is actually so fast, those guys don't buckle at all. They keep playing normally, which isn't a normal thing. As you know, most players would prefer it to be 135, right? Like, they prefer it to be that. It gets over 140 and it messes with your head. It messes with your back lift. You start going, well, I can't play all my different shots. And we have seen him show to be able to play highly technical shots against someone bowling 90 miles an hour in a way that most players never can. So for me, that's the one of the great parts of his game is just that him playing high level pace.
Yeah, I think that was perhaps his strongest suit as far as cricket was concerned, as far as batting was concerned. I think he had so much confidence in himself about him up against fast bowlers that he felt, and he possessed that energy that nobody can get the better of me. No fast bowler and no captain and fast bowler, pair can get the better of me. I'm gonna be head and shoulders above them, and that's why when you saw his numbers or when you see his numbers against fast bowlers, he's always gonna be up there. So even he was so great with this that even in his, when he was not in form, you would see that he was still right up there, because that's the level of greatness that he possessed for fast bowlers. So even if his form dipped, he was still right at the top there, of that table. So that speaks to the greatness of him against perhaps one of the hardest things to do in cricket, right? And I think just the self-belief and the conviction from which he operated was so great that even today at 36, when things are supposed to be not, like it's supposed to trouble you, he's not troubled. And he takes it on. There are times that you can see, okay, with age, his reactiveness or his responsiveness to the short stuff perhaps is a little, he's slightly late. Like I remember one of these games, he got hit on the helmet and then he was really upset with himself and you're like, what the heck and all that. And then he brought the intensity on. I think it's just to kind of get the best out of him and push that adrenaline in to get the highest version of him. And then the next time a short ball came, he pulled it and he was like abusing himself and like brought that intensity on, just to show that he's still the best in the business. And I think he still has it, but he has to perhaps dig deep for it now than it kind of just existed on the surface in the past.
And that's all that sort of stuff. You're talking about the back and everything. And guys like him who have batted as much as they have quite often just have a bad back because they bent over so much of their life. And so you end up with that. And the short ball, we've seen it with fine players like Mike Atherton and Michael Clarke just become targets later in their career, right? Where they can't move anymore.
Like Michael Clarke had a degenerative back, and I didn't know that till I actually spent time with Pup and got to know him a little bit as a human being. He was like, dude, I couldn't play past 33. I was taking cortisone shots left, right, and center. I can't tell you the number of cortisone shots, and it's like unhealthy for me. It would have been an existential problem for me after I finished playing cricket. So I had to finish by 33. So I asked him when we were doing some broadcasting together. I said, when's the last time you picked up a bat? He's like, oh man, don't ask, and I don't even want to think about it. Yeah, I cannot tell you how relieved I am that I don't have to do this. I don't have to pick up a bat again because I had a degenerative back. And a lot of people don't know this until they write a book or they talk about it and being open and vulnerable about it, right? And we'll probably learn a lot of things about Virat and everything that he went through, or perhaps his experience and his side of stuff, right? Because there are multiple narratives. And for me, if I've ever spoken about Virat or his leadership or his captaincy or his greatness as a batter, it has been from an observational point of view. And when I have done that, for me, I am very aware that there is another side, right? But I've spoken to the side that feels true to me, right? Notwithstanding and understanding that he has his side as well. And when it's time for him, if he wants to talk about it, he will talk about it, and then I learn more. Right. And my perspective will perhaps change at that point in time. And I'll speak about it at that point in time because I love having these conversations. And I think there'll be a lot that we'll understand about Virat as well in due course of time, which will be like, now it makes sense. Why he did that the way he did that.
What you're talking about there it's really interesting. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast with you in the first place. Not this episode, but all of them. But yeah. Is because that's what a cricket writer does. Like, I think one thing I really try and teach younger people when they're learning about sports writing is you can't know everything. It isn't your... And when I came in, I remember I did a magazine cover when I was the editor, and it had a question mark on the end. And the old cricket writers were like, you can't do a question. Like, you should be telling people what to think. And I was like, but we don't know. Right. And so, I'm not saying I'm not saying questions are great, because questions can be used badly by press as well. But the point being is that when I write something, someone will say, oh, I disagree with that. Like, my book's come out, right? And a lot of people are going on and on about Virat's the one. Virat, Jeff Boycott, and Steve Waugh are the three I'm getting the most feedback on in the book, right? Too high, too low, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff, right? And I was like, yeah, but we don't actually know the answer to this. You're very angry about 3 players. I had to look at about 90 players, bring that down to about 80 players who had a realistic chance. And then about 37 of those are automatic, but then I have to work out where they go in the order of the list and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, it's unknowable. And if you ask me, I think even now, actually, probably a month after that list came out, I would change some of the order, right? And I'll probably be changing the list of the order of that for the rest of my life, right? Because I will be different and I will change. And I think that's the whole thing of when we're doing this, for people like you and me, we have to accept that, right? That we don't have all the answers, but as you said before, we're looking for the truth as close as we can get to it. And as you said, he might come out and tell us that, there was something going on with his a finger or a hand, or he didn't feel, didn't feel right on certain days, or he went through an emotional funk and all this sort of stuff. We don't know that until he speaks up. And it's, for the external people, it's up to us to do our jobs correctly and get as much information, while knowing that tomorrow Virat can drop another line that makes what we just said and on all of our work not make any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's life, right? It's evolutionary. If you can't work from that evolutionary standpoint and say, and I think as far as your book is concerned, you'll keep changing it. By the time you're 80 and you see a few other players along the way, you'll be like, oh, this goes out of the list, this comes into the list, this is where, this is my ranking now, because you're also evolving as a person, right? So it's gonna be very evolutionary in that point, in that space. So you got to be open, and I think conversations are great. I think we live in a world today where we are looking to cancel people for whatever that means, right? But I think we are living less in a world where we agree to disagree with each other. And I think for me, the whole point of being out there and having these conversations is to turn that up a little bit, because I'd love my kids to live in a world where we just agree to disagree with each other and respect what other people feel, even if you don't agree with them, right?
Yeah, I disagree with
that. And I respect that then.
All right.
But I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah. So we've talked about it quite a bit. One last thing for me. I was lucky enough to be at the Adelaide Test match, the Phil Hughes one. And I think there's quite a bit about the Virat Kohli innings in my book, my old book, the Test cricket book. Because of that, because the book opens and closes with the sort of that Adelaide Test match. I don't think it's the greatest performance I've never sat down and thought of like, what's the greatest performance I've ever seen in a Test match, right? But I don't think I've ever seen someone bat that well in 2 different innings, in 2 different situations, with everything that was going on. And I think knowing so much about Virat and, you playing in that game where his father had passed on and all that sort of stuff, you have to understand that was just not a normal Test match. I think that for sure. After Phil Hughes had died, even the other Test matches around the world were played differently for a little while. And it was, there was such this level of sadness, like something had happened to cricket. And then Virat, in the middle of that, just puts the Indian batting lineup on his back twice. And I remember, and I've probably written about this so many times since, but I remember watching him come off when he was dismissed and he didn't want to leave the crease. It was almost like he couldn't believe that he had somehow not managed to will that victory. And it was probably, I don't say this as Australian, it was probably for the best that the Australian players won that Test match, because it was such a great Test match and with everything that they'd had in the last week. But it was also great that someone pushed them that far. Like if they won it by an innings and 200 runs, doesn't matter. It needed someone like Virat to be like, to almost remind them what cricket was at the other end, that this wasn't a testimonial game, right? That this really, really meant something. And I've seen some incredible things in I was there for the Ben Stokes innings. There was Angelo Matthews innings. I remember Ryan Harris not being able to run in and bowl and still taking wickets in. I've seen incredible things in my career. People taking the ball on their body and, surviving things. But that for me is probably maybe the greatest all-round performance, like as in both innings of a test match and carrying your side that you've ever seen. What's your favorite Virat Kohli as a test player memory?
As a test player.
Yeah, because he just retired from Test cricket, Robbie. Come on.
Yeah.
Do you have Google? You can look these things up before we come on.
For me, I think you're still wearing the helmet next week.
Yeah, I knew the minute I said that you were going to bring the helmet back up, and I was like, damn it, I've opened myself up for nothing here.
I think my favorite, not moment, but I'd say for me it was a series. Was that series in England where the previous series, Anderson had his number, every day, including Sunday, and then he turns up the next series and just scores runs by the buckets. Right, like the work he'd put into that series. It was the kind of work that Sachin had put into before that series where India played Australia, and he prepared for Shane Warne. The kind of depth of work that he put into that time. So for me, it reminded me of that, because here's a guy who willed this performance out of himself, right? Mentally, physically, technically, emotionally, willed that performance. And literally, if you saw that series, he got a chance. Almost every other innings, he got a chance early on, and then he just I believe that as a cricketer, as an athlete, when you work really, really hard and you work really, really earnestly and you put everything on the line, then everything aligns for something to work out for you. Yeah. And you will that out of yourself, and you will that out of the universe, and you will it out of God or whatever you believe in, and then it happens for you. And Virat did that. And for me, that series was a testimony of Virat willing everything to bring up those kind of performances in a series. And for me, that series is easily my favorite Virat series or memory.
Yeah. I think that the thing of his intensity and his professionalism and his flaws all come together in that series. Do you know what I mean? So the two great things about him, and also the one thing that wasn't as perfect. And so he has to overcome, like he's in that series, he's overcoming the dragon, right? Like and every player has this, Ponting and Harbhajan Singh and a lot of great players you go through, they have that little thing that they have to overcome. And I think it's that series is very, it is so memorable because of that. No, I think that's very fair. All right. Well, he's retired anyway, so we'll never mention him again.
No, we'll obviously talk about him. But I want to ask you a question from an Indian perspective, right? Now, we've seen over the last 7-8 months, we've seen Ashwin retire from Test cricket. We've seen Rohit Sharma leave. We've seen Rohit and Virat leave inside of 10 days. Now, from an outside perspective, what does this feel like for you as far as Indian cricket is concerned, as far as tests go?
I think we knew that we were coming to a reload, right? I think we all knew you only need to look at the ages of players. And I think people think that everyone over the age of 35 is going to retire at the same period. And that's not how it works, right? You go back. Do you remember the England side that got very good and went to Australia in 13-14? They really only lost Pryor, Swan, and Trott at that point, right? But it was a complete and utter reload from that, because once you take that was like the spine of what that side was. So it wasn't like Anderson didn't retire and a few of the other older players didn't retire straight away. Obviously, KP was moved on, but I think that if you look at the ages online, that was going to have to change. So once you take Ashwin out of that side, that completely changes what that team is in the future for me, right? Because you don't get someone who can take 500 wickets who can bat, right? You don't get that ability. So once you take that out, your team is different, right?
Yeah.
And so you might be able to cover the batting and you might be able to cover the leadership eventually, but the leadership's going to be harder to cover with Rohit and Virat leaving. You might be able to cover the batting, especially being that, Rohit's been in poor form in the last 12 months and Virat's obviously been in poor form pretty much on and off for the last 5 years, but you can't recover all that. But it's a different side. So I look at it from the outside of, they have to reload and think about how they're going to win test matches over the next couple of years, knowing that some of the older players will stick around and everything else. So that was my big thing I looked at the record of India at home compared to the great Australian teams and the great West Indies teams. And it completely held up. I think it was slightly better than some of those records. But what was incredible about the West Indies team was they lost one whole generation and then they loaded with another generation that still dominated. Whereas Australia didn't do that. There was an obvious decline after Warne, McGrath left. And so are we going, that's what I'm fascinated with from the outside. Are we seeing a team that is going to have to come back to the field a little bit, work out how to win it a little bit, work out how to take 20 wickets a test match while having a deep batting lineup, and then become good again, like Australia managed to do? Or are we seeing what we saw with the West Indies, which is the ability that there's so much talent in India at the moment that Washington can come in and play the Ashwin role, and Akshar can take over from Jadeja if he leaves, and then they Bumrah and Shami stay on, and maybe Prashid Krishna,
but again, Shami back end of his career right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Longer
so does Prashid Krishna become the bowler that I think he should have been for the last couple of years? And there's nothing about Prashid Krishna that says he shouldn't be a success in Test cricket. He's got a high release point.
Absolutely.
He's hard to play when he's back of a length. When the ball's moving around, he should be almost impossible to play at his pace. Like, if he can work it out, he can be great. But that's the thing that we're talking about. Mitchell Johnson was there at the end of McGrath and Warne. And how many years did it take Mitchell Johnson to become Mitchell Johnson?
For him to become Mitchell Johnson.
Yeah.
And
so
live up to his potential.
That's the way that I look at it at the moment. I look at it from an analyst point of view of the talent is there, but can this team just regenerate naturally? Or does it need to have a slight decline? There aren't that many strong test teams at the moment, though, in the world.
And that's my concern for Test cricket, right? As in, for me, if I have to speak about my perspective in this whole thing, I would say that I'm not concerned about India's white ball cricket. I think India is going to do great in white ball cricket. But as far as Test cricket is concerned, I'm not worried about the batting also, because I think we have enough quality batters in even as far as the youngsters are concerned, and they'll come and take up the ranks over Virat and Rohit and all of that, and that'll be fine. But for me, what my concern is about in Test cricket is bowling. Right? Will we have the tools in the box as far as bowling is concerned to win test matches? Yeah. Right? Jadeja's in the back end of his career. Akshar is not like, a spring chicken. He's basically 29, 30 years old.
He hasn't played overseas much either.
He hasn't played overseas as much, right? And then Ashwin's gone. Washington Sundar will get the opportunity now, but he'll have to work it all out. Yeah. Now, do we have the quality of spinners that we had when Ashwin was coming through the ranks, right? Like, will we have a proper replacement for Ashwin? What kind of a role will Kuldeep play, and what will his effectiveness be abroad, right? What happens if Siraj and Bumrah are injured simultaneously, right? If what happens to the bowling then? Who takes the bowling on? And what is the strength of our bowling? And I think those are the aspects that India need to have a very close look at, because bowlers win you test match. In fact, bowlers win you most things in cricket. Yeah. And I think they need to really work that out. Yes, we have potential, but you have to look at the facts as they are. And I think Bumrah again is 31, 32, and is not going to play as a fast bowler. As in, it will be a miracle if he's able to go on till 37, 38, just the way he's going on right now, right? So they're going to have to have a look at these aspects and figure their Test cricket out. I think it's going to take a little bit for them to figure it out. And I think a lot of these pieces going on one after the other is going to be a little bit of soul searching for them in cricket. And so for the viewers and for the supporters of Indian cricket, we have to be a little bit patient and allow this team to build itself up again.
I think it's really interesting because the vast majority of the teams in the world at the moment are bowling teams, right? So you get a team like South Africa who might just be starting to get some batting coming back now after a really dire period. Right? Now, West Indies, no batting, but can still bowl you out. Even Zimbabwe is a team that gets you on a good pitch, can bowl you out. There's lots of teams who can bowl you out. There aren't many who can bat. So it'd be fascinating if India don't bowl as well, right? But are the best batting team by such a big distance, to see how that goes in Test cricket over a period of time. Because the ability to score quickly now is also a weapon that, that England have sort of, Ben Duckett, of course, invented fast batting, has kind of opened things up a little bit as well. So, I think that's fascinating. Anyway, we've talked about all that. Let's go over. I think we've got the scorecard here. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. I pressed it wrong. I pressed the button wrong.
Robbie, this game.
This is
I like
so
this.
fun. I don't know if you follow this guy on Twitter, but you should follow him on Twitter. His name is John Leather, but he goes under the handle Hypercaust. And I don't know what John Leather does in his normal life, Robbie, but he seems to watch every single game of women's cricket at the same time, all the time. And he's such a lovely guy. He doesn't want to come on podcasts or anything. Because sometimes we'll be doing a podcast, we'll be talking about women's cricket, and we'll get something wrong, and he'll be in the comments, and it's like, just come on the podcast. We'll have you on, and you can talk to us.
I'll tell you what. Just get him to put one of those avatars and just turn up. So.
I thought you were going to say, in a helmet, maybe he'd come on.
No, you got to come in a helmet next week. Because if you don't come in a helmet next week, we're going to change our contract up a little bit.
So he was talking about this game. This is a fascinating one. It's there's the ICC qualifiers going on for the T20 World Cup at the moment. I think they're being played in it's in Thailand, isn't it? I had to read into the screen to see. And there's been tons of rain, just shitloads of rain around, and it's completely destroyed this. And so the UAE are playing against Qatar, and they know they're a better team. They've played against them a lot of times before. And so they decide, Robbie, to essentially declare their innings. So they're 163 after about 16 overs, and you can see here that Esha Oza had 113 or 55. Good on her for not taking the red inker and actually declaring actually retiring out, because I reckon that's a conversation that would be tough for other people. You got her opening partner was on her way to 100 as well, maybe a little bit too far away, but had a chance of getting there as well. And they just decided to retire out the entire team so that if the weather did come in, they'd have enough time to bowl at Qatar. They, of course, end up bowling at Qatar out and winning by 163 runs. So, they're 190, I should have said, weren't they? Because I think Qatar made about 20 odd. What I love about this is that all of those women had to agree to make ducks that go on their records, Robbie, for this to happen. We should just have a declaration feature within white ball cricket, because there are special situations where it would make sense. But I love that they all committed to the bit. And this is the most ridiculous looking scorecard you will ever see.
It is. It certainly is. But I think that's what I think it's moments like these. It's situations like these. It is games like this that bring the discrepancies into light, right? This is where something like this is sitting in a dark corner of cricket, and then suddenly a situation arises and suddenly lights thrown there, like, oh, that's an area that needs to be fixed. That's a corner that we need to address. And so this is that corner. Like, there's light on it now. We're throwing a little bit more on it. The ICC is going to review it and say, okay, we need to allow declarations here because people are here to try and win matches. And if that is the intent, then if that's what they deem fit at that point in time, as a consensus, as a group, it has to be allowed. It has to be there. How can it not be there?
Exactly. I remember, so there was someone online who said to me, oh yeah, this wouldn't happen in like Major League Cricket. And I was like, and he didn't mean major T20s. And I was like, I think actually I could make a case as an analyst why this should happen. If you get
100%.
If you got into a position where you knew there was rain in the second innings and you needed to force a result, and your openers have got off to a great start and you've got 160, 180, and it's like, it doesn't matter if you lose, because if you lose, you're out of the playoffs anyway, and you have to win. You actually want to be in the situation where you can come off and make sure that that game happens. And maybe you've got 165 and you're like, well, let's just see what our bowlers could do. It's going to rain, in the back half of this game. It's not going to happen a lot, obviously, right? And it's not going to be as dramatic. I don't think most teams doing this tactic are going to end up winning by 163 runs in it. But it does show again that we need to be a bit more flexible, a little bit more flexible with our thinking. And the other thing is, I want to go back to being a batter. You love your batting average, you guys. That's what you're all obsessed about, and you're worried about all the time.
No, I'll tell you, we don't love it. It's just that you guys have made it such a big deal. It has to be important to us now, so we pay attention to it. It's not like it matters to us. What matters to us is like winning games and contributing to winning games. No, but it matters to you all. It matters to the larger narrative. So because it matters to the larger narrative,
there is a conversation to be had. So Alex Tudor's got a theory that speed guns at games have ruined fast bowling, because everyone's trying to bowl at their top speed now because they're terrified of bowling at 128, because everyone's like, oh, is he tired? Is he injured? And so people are trying to bowl at their top speeds. You could make an argument that batting averages have been ruined by Cricinfo, because now that we can go on at any stage and check someone's batting average, right? Whereas, as you said, there are series where averaging 30 are really good, right? But no one will ever look at that, right? They just like, he only averaged 30 in that series. But it is hard. You and I both know it is hard as a professional. And I know that not all these players are professional in the UAE, but some of them are professional players. Some are school teachers and everything else. it is actually hard to make a decision like this, knowing that it is going to affect your overall legacy. We're still in a position, Robbie, where male cricketers do not run off the last ball of the first innings in T20 games until they are run out, despite the fact that obviously that would help the team every single time. And it's not the only sport where that happens. You see in basketball, people don't take the half-court shots because they don't want it to go up against.
They don't take the shots in the last 3 seconds.
Yeah. So it happens in other sports as well. But that's why I want to commend all of these women for doing this, because I do think, as we've said, they should just change the regulations. There's no reason why we can't have it in there for when we need it. But good on them for being willing to do that.
And as often women do, they bring about a change for the better in us.
It's funny that, isn't it? We don't have many memes this week because not as much cricket was played, but we do have.
That's fine.
We do have this, and we should have brought it up when we were talking about Virat. But for me, as an Australian cricket fan who grew up in Melbourne, cricket's very different in Australia than it is in other places. It's a little bit, the English side of cricket didn't quite shape it, and it sort of is more shaped by rugby league and Aussie rules football. This is the moment where I was already a fan of Virat Kohli, but this is the moment of him sticking the finger up that really meant a lot to me, of like, oh, that's how we play cricket. He's one of us. And I remember writing this years later when the MCG truly respects you, right? Do you know what it does? I don't know if all cricketers know about this, but there's a particular chant that the MCG does when it really respects one of the opposition. And we did it for Richard Hadlee and we did it for Virat Kohli, but it doesn't come out all that often. And the chant is, your name is a wanker, right? So Richard Hadlee had like 70,000 people cheering it. I've seen it in Aussie rules games as well. And I was there when it happened to Virat Kohli. That's like the ultimate sign of respect in Australia, is literally 70,000 people telling you that you're a wanker. And seeing him with the finger up, I feel like it all comes together. Like there was an element of this, that was very cool. I prefer though, if we're talking about Virat memes, the best Virat meme is actually the one where he's screaming into the stumps. Because I think that is, here we go. That is absolutely brilliant.
That one.
The other one I remember, and I don't know if you remember this ad, I think there was like a clean air ad or a clean water ad they might have made in India, and they got all the cricketers in it. And it has Sachin Tendulkar doing like like some sort of burial rites. And it has all the players in these like creepy situations. And they took it down eventually because the backlash against having Sachin doing this in this ad was really, really full on. It was early on in Virat's career. And I've got my memory of it is that there's like a shopping trolley with like, and a parent turns away and turns back. And Virat has replaced the shopping trolley with a wheelchair. And go back, if you can find the ad. And as I said, it was taken off the internet, but it is still around because I found it a couple of years ago when I wanted to. Virat's face, man, is so intense compared to every other cricketer in that thing. Where you're just like, did he know he was acting? Or is he like, he brings this level of intensity. And this is before he married an actress as well. So those are the memes that I remember of his career. We're going to finish up here. There's one last thing that you wanted to talk about today. Oh, wait. Oh, the trumpet, the Barmy Army trumpet. I forgot that also. Like, it's all part of it, right? He brought a sense of theatre to cricket that not everyone brings. Other great players don't always bring.
He did.
Yeah. You had one last thing you wanted to talk about the overseas players and the IPL and the PSL that you wanted to ask me.
Yeah. So, now we know that, Josh Hazelwood's not coming back because of a niggle. So RCB misses him. And then, especially at this point, at the back end of the tournament, they lose an important cog in the wheel. Mitch Starc is not coming back because of geopolitical tensions, obviously. So, just generally for us Indians to understand, from a visitor's point of view, from being an Australian or people from outside of India point of view, how do these things impact you all?
Yeah, I think you have to understand that. Do you know what Australia's nickname is? And I don't know how common this is around the rest of the world because you don't think of it in cricket as much. But Australia's nickname is the lucky country, right? And Australians kind of took this up as we live in the lucky country. But it's actually the original, I think it's a poem it might have come from, which was Australia has never had to fight a war on its own place. It has seafood around it in every different direction that you go to. recently we've started finding more things in the ground that we didn't know. Like if Australia actually mined the country correctly, it would be one of the richest countries on earth forever, right? And it's quite a wealthy country already. We've never had to go through the sort of things that other people have had to go through. And you can throw New Zealand in there as well. New Zealand's a very similar kind of country. Again, so for people from Australia and New Zealand, everything feels like a danger when you leave. The only thing that can kill you in Australia is the animals, right? We've never had to go through all that other stuff. There's been a couple of the emu
war.
We will talk. Maybe there is a great episode on the emu war that we could do one day, which is quite funny.
Good one, buddy.
But, you know, there's been a couple of terrorist things, and we've had a couple of mass shootings at times as well. But there's that famous mass shooting in Australia where literally, like, complete opposite to America. When I grew up, everyone had a gun in Australia, right? But there weren't many gun crimes. Yeah, it was really common to have a gun because farming and all that sort of stuff, and they weren't really regulated. We had one mass gun shooting, right? And everyone's guns got taken away. Because Australians like to feel safe. You've been there. You know what it's like. In Melbourne, you can't cross the street. You'll get pulled over by the police if you cross the street in the wrong place in Melbourne, right? There's so many rules and regulations. Everything's about safety. Yeah. So the rest of the world seems really dangerous to us, which is hilarious because tourists are terrified of coming to Australia because of all the animals. And, you know, we can talk about the snakes and the spiders and my dad having the deadliest spiders in the world in his backyard and just going, yeah, but they're in that corner, so we don't worry about them. But we are very worried. So when it comes to traveling to, I mean, remember Australia was the first country to pull out of playing in Pakistan. And I think it was Andy Bickle who came out years later going, actually, our reasons weren't justifiable at all. And we were being really soft with it. We've had that. There was a couple of years ago when Australia played in Zimbabwe and spent the entire tour complaining about being in Zimbabwe and everything. It's not something that Australians specifically are very comfortable with, which is weird because Australians are tourists by nature, but they do have a bit of an issue with that sort of stuff. And also, it's very different if you grow up in an environment where these are normal things compared to being thrust into them, right? And I think with some of these players, there is probably an uncomfortableness and uneasiness that they have in that they can't really control the environment in a lot of and this is not just an India and Pakistan thing. They feel the same in Sri Lanka and in Bangladesh. They can't control the environment. And you grew up in a place where you can't control the environment and you're comfortable with that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, most people, even poor people, usually would have grown up in a house with a fence between them and their neighbors, their own driveway, you know, and everything else. Suddenly everything's on top of you. And so they really do struggle with that. There's also the fact that you and I both know there are some cricketers who are very educated and really care about this, but a lot of people don't know about what is going on, right? And, you know, there's the famous story about the West Indians going to play in rebel cricket in South Africa. And some of those players didn't know what apartheid was, right? They found out afterwards, Robbie, when it ruined their lives and their careers, but they didn't know what it was. And, you know, I've had conversations with cricketers who just, they don't know anything about
besides cricket,
you know, what this is. Yeah. And so for them, it's very hard to process what is going on. So I think there's an element of that. There's also an element of, you know, players struggling with Asia in general if they don't grow up with other Asian people around them. Like I was lucky enough that all my babysitters were Sri Lankans and my best friends were Sri Lankans. Like it wasn't an alien concept to hang out with Asian people because that was just where I came from. You know, we had Bangladeshi cricketers and Indian cricketers and Pakistani cricketers in my team. I was always used to that, but I've got a lot of friends who didn't grow up with any of those people. And so when they are in those sorts of situations, that racist, you know, thing in the back of their head kicks in. And you start to go, oh, I don't want to go there. It's not safe anymore. Or I don't feel confident. Or, you know, and you and I would both know multiple cricketers who would probably eat the same meal in India, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan over and over again because they're terrified of the food, right? Some of the best food in the world is from those countries, but they've heard about one person who got sick from the food, right? And they'll never eat that food again, right? That's a real thing that those players have to go through and it's something that they have to deal with. So I don't think it's fair, right? And I love, you know, I've been to India, 6-7 times. I've been to Sri Lanka 4 times. You know, I love that part of the world, but not everyone I grow up with feels comfortable in it. And they also take the first opportunity, I think, to get out of that sort of situation. And if you're not used to it, like I think that's very fair. Like I understand that, even if you kind of want them to work beyond their initial fears.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. I think, like you said earlier, we live with a lot of uncertainty in this part of the world, right?
Yeah.
And we're comfortable, not having that. And so and there are a lot of things about Australia that for us seems unrelatable as well. Like, y'all would have a punch up over a beer,
Yeah.
as in you're a very physical people, right? That's how you deal with stuff. So for us, that's unrelatable. It's like, hey, we can have a conversation and sort this out,
Yep.
And I understand culturally we're very different people, and and so for me sometimes I think just to understand it from a human perspective a little bit more deeper, what they perceive, because I think in general India is a really safe place, especially for people visiting and coming.
Yeah,
and
I've
playing
never
cricket and all
felt
of that
unsafe in India.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
India or Sri Lanka. I was in Sri Lanka when there was a talk of a coup, and I was in that heartland of Rajapaksa at the time.
Mm.
I still didn't feel unsafe. I was more like,
Yeah.
what do I do if a coup happens? Do you know what I mean? Because I've never had to deal with where do I
With a
go? And I was a long way from Colombo. So, like, how do I get
Yeah.
out of the country if I need to or whatever? And even
Yeah.
for that, that's none of that stuff has ever entered my brain before, right? So,
Yeah.
but I've never worried about like going out in the streets or whatever, or in most cricket countries, even there are times in Kingston, because Kingston's a full-on city, and I've never understood Kingston in Jamaica, and I don't feel comfortable there because I don't understand it, and so
Yeah,
that one
exactly.
struggles. But most
Yeah.
most South African cities, which I always get told, don't take your family to South Africa. I took my family to South Africa. They loved it. They love South Africa.
Yeah.
They want to go back, over and over again. So, you fear what you don't know, right?
Yeah,
And so I know lots
absolutely.
of. Do you remember that? This is such a weird story. You might not remember it, but there was a period of time where a lot of Indian students were getting beaten up in Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
And it happened to be where I was living, where it was happening. It wasn't me, Robbie. I don't want you to suggest that it was me, but it was my area, and it was basically there was a university where a lot of Indian students had flown over to, and that university happened to be in quite a full-on area of Melbourne that is well known for violence and drug taking and all that sort of stuff. What was happening with the Indian students were they didn't know the right streets to walk down, right? And they were walking, and I know this because I was kind of right in the middle of it, and I was like, I had a friend who tried to do it because he came from Sydney, and I went, no, we don't walk down that street. And he went, but that's the shortcut. And I went, it's not the shortcut, right? That is where the trouble lies. If you don't know those sorts of things. And so I remember being inundated with people going, Melbourne's so violent, whatever. And I was like, it's this one little area of Melbourne. But again, the people in charge weren't looking after all those students who came over, right? It's really, it's really a different kind of, it's the same with, I don't think, and we talked about this before with welfare of players. I don't think overseas players are trained very much in how to handle different societies and different areas and everything else. The only time I've ever worked with the cricket team where we were told what to do was when we were in Jamaica, when we were in Kingston, and we were told don't leave the hotel. I'm like, well, that's not really great advice because it's not that nice a hotel, and people are gonna leave.
Yeah, but because I think from their perspective, it's easier to say don't leave the hotel than explain what that culture is and what where are the areas to stay away from, and like how much can you indemnify yourself, from by saying okay, don't go to these areas, and you go to a certain other area, and then something happens there.
Yeah.
So then it's like it's easier to kind of say, be safe, err on the side of safety, stay at home, stay in the hotel for the next week that you're here, and then move on to the next place. But that leaves a bad kind of impression about that place.
That's
like,
and I
but
think that's
if,
the thing
if
I'm
the
trying
players,
to say is that
if
you
the
end up
players
thinking
can,
I can't leave, and so it must be bad. Whereas actually, like I've worked in teams where they've like, don't leave the hotel, and I've left the hotel, and I'm like, I love this city. This city's incredible, right? Like, if you're only told that you can't do anything, and you and I both stayed in Johannesburg, and people will say you can't walk down the street, right? And it's like, do you mean times I've walked down a street in Johannesburg and I've been fine? There have been times when I've walked down the wrong street and I've worked it out very, very quickly. And my wife was in Johannesburg and she walked down a street and the local said, can you come in for a minute? Because you shouldn't, this is not the street that you walk down, right?
Yeah.
But my wife feels much more comfortable in Johannesburg now, knowing that, than she did before, locked in the hotel,
Absolutely.
feeling like she needed an armed guard to be taken to the shopping center.
Yeah, but sometimes it's easier to err on the side of safety because you're just there for a particular reason, and you have you feel safer. But I think again you need to find a balance with it. And for me, I try and speak to a lot of these drivers who come to pick us up from the airports and all of that, and kind of have conversations to go, where are the good areas to go, where are the areas like as a tourist I need to stay away from. Funnily enough, in Joburg they told me stay away from the city center. Don't go down there, as in that's not safe for guys like you. But there are many other nice places that you can go to, and then they mention that this is a nice place, really safe, you can go there, great food or whatever, whatever you want to do. And having these conversations with locals are important. If you're able to do that, then you really get to know a city a lot more.
You've been out in England after dark, right?
Oh man,
some of those nightclub districts, you come out in Durham and it's just like no one's wearing any clothes. It's freezing cold. Everyone's drunk.
Yeah.
Everyone's fighting for the same taxis. Like,
yeah,
any big city in the world is going to have that. But if it's not your culture, you have to understand it and develop, a way of handling
an understanding for it.
Yeah, and if you lock yourself off, so I don't want to have a go at any of these players for not wanting to come back, because I can understand the
absolutely
the
not.
there. And I know a lot of players who from Asian countries who don't like spending time in the UK, right? For various different reasons. They have issues with stuff there. You are who you are, and all these people are different, and you have to kind of live your own story. This idea that, that you have to go. No, it's a job. You're allowed to say no to work. It might mean that you don't get more work next time. That's how these things go. Anyway, Robbie, absolute pleasure chatting with you today, as always. We finally got it up on your Twitter account, so we're
yes, I know.
Very much. I will be.
I'm still disappointed. Nothing's going to make up for the fact that you haven't worn a helmet tonight.
That made up for it a little bit, didn't it? That made up for it a little bit. Thank you.
Next week, I need a helmet. Guys, pull him up for this. Oh yeah, we didn't do the super chats today.
Sorry.
Karthik
says, is it just a coincidence that VK went 180 degrees from loving Test cricket to retiring at 36 in a few years after the BCCI's new restrictions on family visits?
So Karthik, listen, I see this. All of this can be really speculative, buddy. But to be very honest, we need to operate from a modicum of empathy as well, and what makes a person thrive. We spoke at length about the intensity and the emotions and the excellence that Virat came, and the standard of excellence that Virat came into Test cricket with, and just cricket in general with, right? So it's gonna take a lot out of you. So I don't think he went 180. I think he probably just. It was a measured decision. You could see that he spoke about it. He informed people about it. He was asked to think about it, and there's a lot that's happened. And for someone like him, who's been through what he's been through, who's journeyed through what he's journeyed through, the way he's journeyed through it, and everything that we spoke about in this episode, I think it feels right for him, and we need to respect it. That's about it. I feel let's not try and create narratives out of it. I think it's just what it is.
Kaushal says, what will happen in the aftermath of the recent Indo-Pak war? Is India-Pakistan games in the next World Cup off the table?
Yes.
You think they're off the table?
Yes.
So how do...
And I think they should. And I think they should be off the table. Again?
But then how does the...
I don't know. I don't know how it'll work out. Even if it means if India have to give a walkover over Pakistan, I think that's what the government might decide. And
which I think that's
we'll all be on board.
Yeah,
right.
I think
we'll all be on board about it.
I think that's the better way of doing it. I don't think they will do that, but I think that's the better way of doing that. I know this is very random, but Sri Lanka once had a walkover in one of their games because they didn't want to play Israel. And if you're willing to lose the points, then I mean, the
Fair
English
enough.
players was it in Kenya or Zimbabwe? Had a similar thing. If you're willing to lose the points, Australia and the West Indies as well. Sega says, don't play as feel like, let me just score 800 more runs and get to 10K before I retire. I feel sad seeing his numbers. Look, the other thing is, we didn't talk about this, but I think if you're a great player, a lot of people have gone on about the 5 bad years. In Virat's mind, he's just like, yeah, but I'm only 1 innings away from fixing that, right? But to go to this particular question, he's also thinking, it hasn't worked for a while here. It doesn't matter if I get to 10K. Like, if I limp over the line, I may not feel any better than I do now. You're weighing up all those sorts of things. There are some players who really care about that stuff. A lot of players don't care at all.
Yeah, and I think, I think the players that do care about it, want to make it a talking point, perhaps on some level, as in, and not even consciously, perhaps, even subconsciously. Maybe it's just a box they want to tick
Yeah.
when they were young as kids, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's just
Had it up
that
on their
perhaps.
fridge when they were a kid, right?
Yeah,
And they have to do
for
it.
for Virat, I think his whole thing was, I want to be the hardest working guy in the room. I want to bring the most intensity in the room. I want to bring the most will to win amongst the 22 players that are here today on the field. And I think he did that. And he did that and then some in his career. So I don't think numbers were a thing for him.
Shanu says, heartbroken. We're so used to watching his intensity for 5 days. Test cricket will be too long and unwatchable for me. His Test legacy as Test captain stands out. Just one thing I would say, and I said this about when Sachin Tendulkar retired and when Warne retired. If you really honor the player and you love what they did in Test cricket, you kind of have to keep following the format a little bit, because if everyone starts to make those decisions over the next 20 years, we end up with Test cricket not meaning as much. Right?
Yeah, and it's also that you have to live with the hope that another one will rise, right?
Agreed.
And that's what happened with Sachin Tendulkar as well. Like when he finished, it was so emotional for all of us. I remember crying just watching it on television, and I'm like weeping, when Paji retired, because of what he meant to me as a cricketer, right? And just as someone that I was lucky enough to open the batting with him for India and all of that. But just for my experience, I wept because my hero was retiring, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop then. But the thing is, you live in the hope that another one like him will rise, and we've seen that so quickly. Whoever imagined that someone like Sachin Tendulkar would rise from Indian cricket, and we thought, it's going to take a couple of generations perhaps and all of that. But here, he came in the next 2 years.
Siddharth says, I fear we won't see a Kohli-like intensity again. Today's players are too friendly and brand conscious. Never seen anyone who wanted it more. Siddharth, I don't know how old you are, but I've heard this about every single generation of players. They're always like, we'll never find someone who like that. Of course we will. There are kids who come through at the moment who have the same level of intensity, and they might be more heightened than Virat because they might have seen Virat and grown up with him. So I don't think you have to worry about that.
I reckon you're just trying to deal with the sadness that it brings you,
which is fair.
Seeing someone, which is absolutely fair, but I know it makes you sad, and that's fine, right? It's genuinely fine.
There is a genuine sense of loss because so I grew up. I was about 16 when Ponting made his debut in Test cricket, right? And then I covered him as a professional when I got older. My entire sort of conscious life was about Vicky Ponting being a cricketer for Australia. And I had to deal with the fact that is gone, right? That is, everything that comes after Ricky Ponting is fine, but it's something else. And you have to deal with that in any way you can. But there will be people who will be intense and that will be an
guys,
issue.
I have to mention that he's not done yet. It's just one version of the game. The legacy of Virat Kohli will continue to live on in one-day cricket. And I think the fact that, again, this has to be a thought-out decision. Now, Virat and Rohit are making themselves available for one-day cricket. And the likes of a Jadeja are going to be there. So there is a plan in view. Maybe they want to finish off their international career with the next World Cup, the one-day World Cup. And that's a box that they desire to be ticked. So they need to let go of the things that doesn't serve perhaps for them in the long run what they want to achieve as far as serving Indian cricket is concerned. So a lot of these aspects also come into consideration, notwithstanding everything else that we discussed on the show. So a lot of these aspects also come into consideration while making a decision, right? We're on the outside observing this. They're on the inside making this choice with a lot of thought. I'm telling you, retirement is not an easy call. A lot goes into making that call.
Siddharth says, Sachin Tendulkar stayed motivated to play for so long. I think it's a combination of that was someone whose entire life was around that one thing, and his body stayed up. And so his love of the game stayed up.
He kept. I wouldn't say his body stayed up, Kimbo. I would say he made his body stay up. No, because you have to understand it.
No, I get what you're saying. But what I mean is there are probably other cricketers who into the late 30s, early 40s who would want to continue to play. And sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you can't get out of bed in the morning, right? Like it's physical.
And
to
I'm
do
telling
that.
you, I have seen Sachin Tendulkar, I have seen Paji, broken toes,
Oh yeah.
fractured rib,
But
broken
that's where the love
fingers.
comes in as well, right? You got to, if he loves what he does, he's going to do
He
it on those days
willed
too.
it
Yeah.
in 2008 in the CB series. I'm telling you, there probably wasn't a part of Sachin Tendulkar's body that wasn't injured. The way he turned up for the finals and the way he, like, just that entire series, man, we were like, how is this God doing this? Like, that was how that is how we actually felt when Sachin turned up for that series. So, and with Paji, to answer your question, Sid, I think his, like, you have to understand this from a human perspective, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes to speak about this, because think about it. He came in the early 90s or late 80s into the game as a 14, 15, 16 year old. Again, what is the level of exposure he had compared to what we have today versus what we had in 1989 when he came through the ranks? His whole being is cricket. His significance as a human being comes from cricket. His the way he recognizes himself, the way he recognizes himself not just as an individual, as a cricketer, as a human being, all comes from cricket. So imagine giving that up means giving up on yourself on a certain degree. So for me, I can empathize with the fact that, and I think that was one of the big reasons that allowed him to keep going for as long as he went, right? Because your whole sense of significance, your whole sense of being, your whole sense of just relevance comes from the sport. So letting go of the sport also emotionally, existentially, must have been a hard thing for him to do, which also kept him motivated to go on for as long as he possibly and physically could have gone on.
Yeah.
I think that's why he had as long as a career.
Sidolf also
Other players
says, feel
Yeah.
void and gloom when greats retire. I think we've already covered that. We all do. And,
we all do. I'll
That's
give you an
just how it
example
is.
that surprised me. When Vinay Kumar retired from cricket, and first class cricket, things were not great between him and me, and things are now, right? And a lot happened between us in Karnataka cricket, and not directly, but more indirectly, and a lot transpired. I'll
You
speak
lived a
about it
life
perhaps
together.
at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lived a life together, right? And for me, when he retired, so things weren't great and he retired just a little before me, I think. And so when he retired, I felt a void. I was like, oh man, I'm feeling bad for this guy. I felt sad and I felt like a void. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting human experience. Things are not all great between him and me, but I'm still feeling this void because I journeyed with him, right? We journey with the cricketers we love as fans
Agree.
and as supporters and as cricketers, right? We journey with them. So when they do call time, you experience a part of the void and and the sadness that they perhaps experience. They perhaps experience more of a completion of a cycle in their journey, or a part of their journey, but we experience the void and the sadness of not perhaps being a part of that journey anymore. Or
No, I agree.
and so yeah.
Sembi says Virat's
His form dipped
dropped.
is I
Yeah.
think what he,
Yeah, I think that's what he
wants to
means.
say.
To be honest, I think his form was dipping. I don't think it was.
Again,
to do
I
with
have a human
captaincy.
perspective to this. I don't have a cricket perspective. I have a human perspective to this, and I think, when he was stripped of captaincy, or when he gave it up, so to speak, I think from a very human perspective, there's an enormous amount of power he was exercising, right? And I think and I think along the way, not from his captaincy, but from his leadership, there's probably a little bit of alienation that happened of certain players within the group. And then suddenly he had to exist in that same group without having any of the power, right? From a human perspective, that would perhaps take a lot of time to adjust into and find where you exactly land, because you were that whole structure that held this whole thing together till that point in time. And suddenly you're not that person anymore. You're just part of that structure. You're underneath the structure. And then suddenly you have to figure out where you land in the power structures just of this team that you exist within. Right? So existentially, as a human being, he probably was soul searching. And that's what I mean from a human level. He was soul searching for a couple of years, for a couple of years of the 5 years of, that he was going through. And I think that soul searching kind of held him, like took a while. And I think that's part of why his form perhaps also dipped.
Ashwin says, do you think focusing on legacy makes us focus on the worst of a player too much? I think the problem with legacy is, I always think about this from not a sports perspective, but a Quentin Tarantino perspective, right? Quentin Tarantino is so obsessed with his legacy that I wonder if sometimes he doesn't take chances to make himself a better writer and director, because he's so worried about just making the right movies that everyone's going to say, oh, look at this, the man didn't have any failures or anything else. Whereas actually as an artist, you should have failures. And as an athlete, if you're trying to win games, sometimes you should make mistakes that end up on the other side. You should have ups and downs, you know. And so I understand your point here, Ashwin, but I think everyone thinks about legacy a little bit too much. Realistically,
and I think
you have to stay in the moment.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. But Ashwin, I think also we have a very glossy connotation of what legacy should mean.
Yeah.
Legacy shouldn't always necessarily mean good things. I think legacy should be true. Legacy should be human. Legacy should be both good and bad, because you learn. It should be both highs and lows, because you learn so much from the lows that define the highs for you that come after that. So I think legacy should be very human. And I think our whole perception of legacy should shift. And if that shifts, then you'll know that anything that has been shared today, or whatever we've shared today, is describing a human being going through a journey of his life, and not, you know, or not just kind of going through a cricketer's journey. It's actually a human journey, and cricket being a part of it.
Yash says, I will still watch Test cricket, but it will be less exciting, less stressful, less frustrating, less exciting. Gonna feel less sadness and less happiness after him. If this is the player that defines your love of the game, this is how you're supposed to feel. But I can tell you, as someone who has had those people in my life before, you find other ways to enjoy the game, and you find it changes. But I always go back to the same thing. Most people think music peaked between their age of 15 and 25, right? That is the thing that got you into music in the first place. And of course, everything else you're comparing to how you felt as a 16-year-old the first time you put on a vinyl record and it blew your mind. You're never going to be able to recreate that.
Don't reveal how old you are.
I was actually when CDs came around, Robbie. I'm okay, but I do like vinyl. I still own vinyl today. I still have, anyway. But the point being is that that's what we do. That's okay, Yash. You're going to have a different relationship with cricket going ahead, and that's not a bad thing. That's just humanity again, as we said. Keshav said, "There's no way we're answering this, Keshav." So now, who would your choice be for the captain and number 4? I think we did it in the last episode anyway. Oh no, it was captain we did last episode.
Listen, you're doing so many podcasts, you don't know who you're answering these questions with.
Number 4.
We didn't do this question
India. Number 4 for India. No, we definitely did captaincy. We talked about Bumrah, didn't we, being captain, and Gill.
Captaincy.
But at number 4, I think the most logical choice is Rahul Tripathi.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other Rahul. I would have gone with the other Rahul. I think he's the right choice there.
It's Rahul Tripathi. BG says, why Indian legends not getting the farewell they deserve last farewell? Australia send off their players. Well, look at Warner when Smith goes. It depends though. Australia's had some players. I mean, Adam Gilchrist played at the his first test being booed because of how Ian Healy was handled. There've been lots of Australian players who've got the short shift, and sometimes you retire in the middle of a season, like in between seasons, right? And so it's very hard for you to come back for one test if you're already emotionally moved on. But plenty of great players from India have had that great final moment as well. But not everyone wants it either. Some players don't like the, you know.
BG, I think let's focus on the good and focus on not the discrepancies. And I think obviously we can look at players not getting it, and there are multiple reasons for it, and these are deeply personal reasons. Some people want to send off when they're retiring, from their corporate job. Yep. Some people just quietly want to walk away into the sunset, and both are absolutely fine.
Well, I was just about to end the show. Bronny comes in with, will Virat go into broadcasting? Oh, I'm interested in this.
Yeah. He'd make a great broadcaster.
I think he will, just because I think I do think I think you're right. I think he will go into broadcasting. If for no other reason that there's going to be so much money dumped in front of him at times, he'll be like, okay. Like
Nah,
whether he does it
I
all the
think
time.
no, I think he'll do a few things here and there, but
Yeah.
I don't think, like I said in our previous episode, I think there's some cricketers who go through so much mentally and emotionally through the whole journey of their cricket as a human being that, you know, they're like, why do I really, like, why do I need to do this? Because you're not doing it for money then. Because it's not like the money is not going to be enticing. But why am I doing it? One is they should be deeply passionate about it. And one is they probably want to, you know, change the narrative, or because of the impact they actually have on cricket. So they want to probably change the narrative or about themselves or about
the money's
game.
not important now. The money becomes more important about 5 to 7 years after you've retired. And I've seen a few players who'll say they'll never commentate, and 5 or 7 years in, you get offered a decent amount and you come back. But you're right. He shouldn't need them. It should never be about the money for him. But it will. I do think he has things to say that he hasn't said, and he loves talking. Like I think we know that he's really good. You know, it's funny. You know, for my book, I spent a lot of time going back watching a lot of his podcasts when he's, you know, on people's podcasts. I think he is just a natural conversationalist and enjoys that.
He is.
Anyway, that is it for me and Robbie today.
He has a lot to share.
Yeah, he has a lot to share. We'll get Virat on the podcast one day wearing a helmet. We'll bring it all together.
Maybe without me. Maybe do just KimAppa with just you and him. I don't know how much he'd want to talk to me after what I've said about his leadership.
Robbie, don't blink if you're afraid of BCC. Oh, let's get rid of that nonsense. All right, we'll be back again next time here on KimAppa. And thank you for everyone. Like, subscribe. We're everywhere, me and Robbie. You have to find us.
Yeah.
Once you find us, you'll learn to love us.